Hello again. It's funny what encourages or motivates us into building a new layout. In my case, I'd been thinking of building a small shunting layout for some time and had been searching around for inspiration. It should be portable, capable of being operated in the warmth and comfort of our house, and small enough to take up very little space when not in use. Nothing I found really appealed, and then I came across the Budget Model Railway's floating shelf challenge. There were some rules: maximum 2 boards, 1 scenic and 1 fiddle yard, 60 centimetres by 23 centimetres each, at least 1 point on each board, and a minimum of 2 buildings on the scenic section. Oh, and it should use floating shelves. Phew. I liked the idea of using floating shelves, as it would save me the bother of having to construct any baseboards. But if there was only 1 point on each board, would shunting operations very quickly become rather boring? I also had my doubts about the size of the shelves, which seemed more suited to N-gauge, an I model in 00. Train lengths would be restricted to between 2 and 3 wagons, and there would be no room for a run-round. But, despite these doubts, I rather perversely decided to build a layout anyway. 2 60-centimetre floating shelves were purchased and covered with cork tiles. Clasps were fitted to each shelf to enable them to be fastened together for running trains, and an end screen fitted to one of them in order to differentiate the scenic portion from the fiddle yard. At this stage, the plan was that the left-hand board was to be the fiddle yard, whilst the right-hand shelf would be the scenic section. Track was laid on both sections. Once the track was down, I was even less sure that the project was a good idea, as the sidings were very short. However, I decided that even if the layout was never completed, the left-hand board would still make an ideal loco testing facility. As a further experiment, a cheap PWM controller was purchased and fitted as described in my previous video, which can be found by clicking the link above. A couple of potential disadvantages of using a floating shelf for a baseboard soon became apparent. All the wiring has to be on top of the shelf surface, where it could be visible. This might be okay for the fiddle yard end, but would require some careful disguising for the scenic section. For the time being, the wiring was laid loosely near the right-hand end of the board, and connecting blocks fitted to give current to the second board. Perhaps slightly more worryingly, point motors also have to be fitted on top of the shelves. They can of course be disguised by fitting buildings over them, and at least there would only be one on the scenic board. But I got round this problem because early on I decided that as the points would be in easy reach from the front of the boards, they would both be hand operated. Having fitted the wiring connector blocks, the 2 boards were tested to ensure everything worked. It did, but this revealed 2 further disadvantages or problems. The PWM controller was okay for testing locos on my rolling road, but did not have fine enough speed control for shunting on what would be a very small layout. Also, the controller was in the wrong place. Reaching over the track to control trains was not a good idea. Fairly obviously, the best place to put the controller would be near the front of the board and closer to my operating position. As there was no room to place a controller actually on the board near the front, my thoughts turned to a handheld controller. A socket could be fixed to the front of the shelf and only plugged into the controller when the layout was actually in use. I don't know why I hadn't thought of this earlier, as I have used these controllers successfully on my main garage layout for years. So that's where I am at the moment. I'm still not sure about whether I should have bothered, but despite a total lack of planning, I have at least achieved something. But will there be a further episode? Who knows? Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed some more ramblings, and see you next time.